The prairie stretched endlessly under a pale western sky, where the winds carried both dust and sorrow. At the edge of Copper Creek, a lonely grave stood beneath a crooked cottonwood tree. A wooden cross marked the resting place of Sarah Cole, wife of Ethan and mother of a 6-year-old girl named Clara. Ethan Cole, a broad-shouldered cowboy with calloused hands, stood in silence beside that grave. His hat was pressed firmly against his chest, his jaw clenched as if every emotion had been locked away. He was a man used to burying hardships, but this was different. Losing Sarah felt like losing the very light of his life. Beside him, little Clara clutched the hem of his coat. Her brown curls were tangled, her cheeks streaked with dried tears. She looked up at her father with eyes too wise for her years, eyes that already knew loneliness. "Papa," she whispered, her voice small and trembling, "if Mama's gone to heaven, who's going to tuck me in at night?" Ethan's throat tightened. 1,000 words burned inside him, yet none came out. He could tame wild horses, face down outlaws, ride into storms. But he had no answer for this one simple question from his daughter. So he knelt down, pulled her into his arms, and held her as the prairie wind howled around them. Days turned into weeks. Ethan worked from dawn till dusk, keeping the ranch alive. He cooked what meals he could, though most nights it was just beans and bread. He tried to keep up with Clara's laughter, but it was fading, little by little. She spent her evenings on the porch steps, clutching her rag doll, staring down the dirt road as if waiting for someone who might never come. And then, one spring afternoon, someone did. The stagecoach rolled into town in a cloud of dust. When it stopped outside the general store, a young woman stepped down, her dress simple but neat, her hands carrying a single suitcase. Her name was Anna Whitfield. She wasn't from Copper Creek. She was from far back east, carrying hopes, fears, and a letter tucked safely inside her bag. That letter had been written by Ethan's sister, who had taken pity on her grieving brother and arranged for Anna to come west as a mail-order bride. Ethan hadn't known. He hadn't asked. His heart was still chained to a grave under the cottonwood tree. So when Anna introduced herself, standing tall despite the nerves fluttering in her chest, Ethan's eyes hardened. "My sister meant well," he said, his voice low and edged. "But I didn't send for you. I didn't ask for this." Anna's heart sank. She had left everything behind. Her town, her work, her family's cold indifference, hoping that here she might find a new beginning. But here she stood, rejected before she'd even taken her first breath of western air. And then, just as Anna thought she might burst into tears, a little voice broke the silence. Clara, with her doll tucked under one arm, stepped forward. Her eyes lit up with innocent curiosity as she tugged on Anna's skirt. "Are you going to stay with us? You look real nice." Anna knelt, her face softening as she looked into the child's hopeful eyes. "Well, that depends," she said gently. "Do you want me to stay?" Clara nodded, a smile tugging at her lips for the first time in weeks. "Yes, please." Ethan stood frozen. His daughter hadn't smiled like that since her mother's passing. He sighed heavily, rubbing the back of his neck. Maybe you can stay for a while," he muttered. And so it began. Not a welcome with open arms, but a beginning all the same. Anna Whitfield learned the rhythm of the ranch like a new song. Morning light would find her in the kitchen before dawn, hands flour-dusted, as she baked a simple bread that smelled like home. Clara would pad in, still in her nightdress, and press her small face to the steam-warmed window, watching Ethan saddle the horses. Anna had a way of making the house feel softer, a folded quilt on the chair, a kettle that didn't clang so loudly, a bowl of fresh berries laid out without fuss. Ethan watched all this from a distance. He appreciated the meals. He noticed the way Clara's shoulders relaxed when Anna was near, but he also felt a raw, private ache. Every laugh Anna coaxed from his daughter reopened the space where Sarah had once been. He would stand by the fence, hands on the post, looking at the horizon and thinking of a life that could not be stitched back together. Small rituals formed between Anna and Clara. After chores, Anna would sweep the floor slowly while Clara danced in the dust motes. On evenings when the sky went wide and orange, Anna would sit on the porch with a book and invite Clara into her lap. The child loved stories, not the tall, dramatic kinds Ethan heard from old ranchers, but gentle tales about a little fox who learned to share, and a daring little girl who found courage in surprising places. "Read the fox story again," Clara would beg, nestling her head against Anna's shoulder. Anna read, and Clara's eyelids would droop. The way Anna smoothed Clara's hair, the soft, unconcerned way she kissed a scraped knee. These little things began to feel like stitches closing an old wound. But Copper Creek is a place where tongues move faster than weather. A new face in town was always a story waiting to be told. At the post office, words slipped like spilled coffee. "She's a stranger. She's after his money." What does a city girl know of ranch life? The whispers were small at first, a rustle that might have been the wind. Yet every time Anna walked down Main Street, someone's eyebrows lifted. Every time Clara strolled beside her, an eye narrowed approvingly or suspiciously. One afternoon at the Mercantile, Anna paused to buy thread. The shopkeeper's wife, a woman with hands that had scrubbed more dishes than years she'd lived, leaned in and said, loud enough for others to hear, "You take care now, miss. Men around here don't take well to strangers meddling in family matters." Anna forced a smile and paid for the thread without answering. The words pricked, though. She had left a small life behind and traveled across plains with nothing but hope and a letter. To be called a meddler stung. Back at the ranch, Clara noticed the change. She saw Anna's shoulders dip a little when she thought no one watched. The child's remedy for grown-up sorrows was simple and sure: politeness and presence. She busied herself handing Anna the thimble, bringing cups of tea, or asking for another story, even when she already knew the ending. One evening, while the three of them sat by the stove mending clothes, Ethan's sister, the woman who had arranged Anna's journey, dropped by. Her visit should have been a comfort. Instead, it introduced a tension that had been simmering beneath the surface. Ethan's sister had a practical face, one shaped by worry and responsibility. She watched Anna as she pulled the needle through cloth and, with a faint sigh, said, "You're helpful, Anna. But you must understand, people talk." She glanced at Ethan, as if seeking permission to say more. Anna put down the needle. Her hands were steady, but her voice wavered. "I didn't come here to cause trouble," she said softly. "I only wanted a chance to belong somewhere." Clara reached up and took Anna's hand between her palms, squeezing as if to steady her. The simple touch said what words could not. "We're here. Stay." That night, Anna sat alone on the back steps, tracing circles in the dust. The wind carried voices from the saloon, laughter, a stray song, the clink of bottles. She wondered if she had been foolish to come. She had left a home not because she disliked it, but because she had believed in the possibility of being needed. Yet need and belonging are not the same thing in towns that measure people by rumor. Across the yard, Ethan paused in his work and looked at the silhouette of the woman on the steps. He remembered his own vow when Sarah had died: to protect Clara from more hurt than the world already gave. He also remembered the old man saying that a house is a home when you can't imagine it without someone in it. For the first time in weeks, Ethan felt the pull of that idea like a slow sunrise. He did not know how to bridge grief and opening, But he did know the child who had begun to laugh sometimes, and that knowledge made the idea worth the risk. The next morning, after a quiet breakfast, Clara brought Anna a small daisy chain and tucked it into her hair. Anna placed a gentle hand on the child's cheek, and with a smile that reached her eyes, said, "Thank you, Clara." The simplicity of the gesture pushed back against the town's murmurs. In the face of suspicion, a child's gift was the first small victory of belonging. Anna's hands grew calloused from hard work, and her confidence grew with every task she completed. She mended harnesses, boiled soap, and learned the names of the wildflowers that grew by the creek. But every victory had a shadow. Rumors flared into opinions, and opinions hardened into judgments. A group of women at the church bazaar, who had once tolerated one another with polite nods, now looked at Anna as if she'd rearranged the order of things. Ethan's brother, long resentful and quick to judge, didn't disguise his feelings. He came over one afternoon, his gait full of the town's unsaid assumptions. He sat at their rough table and said bluntly, "You can't expect folks to welcome every hand that shows up on your porch. We've lost Sarah, Ethan. That's real. You don't fix the past with a new wife." The words were not cruel. They were the blunt, practical kind folk mistake for wisdom. Ethan's jaw tightened. Anna's lips pressed together. Clara, who had been playing with wooden blocks under the table, glanced up and asked, "Did Mama have a brother like you?" The question landed in the air, all innocence and all clarity. Anna felt that question as a small knife. She wanted to tell them that she did not replace Sarah. She only wanted to help the pieces fit. She wanted to tell Ethan's brother that families could grow in ways that did not dishonor the past. But she knew better than to say it in anger. She simply reached for Clara's hand, threading her fingers through the child's small ones and holding on. There were moments when Anna nearly left. She rose before dawn one morning, packed her small valise, and sat at the edge of the yard, listening to the world wake. She thought of the train, of returning east to the life she'd left. She thought of the face of her own mother, of the town she'd known as a child. But then Clara's muffled steps creaked toward her. The child climbed into Anna's lap and murmured, "Promise me you won't go." Anna's heart folded. The child was not bargaining for comforts. She was asking for a person to be present. That was worth more than any fear. Yet Anna's doubts were not merely stirred by gossip. She watched how Ethan stood at the window some nights, and how his shoulders would go tight as if bracing against a storm only he could feel. He still carried Sarah's sweater, folded in a drawer, and sometimes at dusk he would take it out and breathe in the soft scent that reminded him of a past he could not bring back. Seeing him in that private reverence made Anna step lightly around the house, never to intrude, always to offer without demanding. Clara, however, did not understand the adult rules of grief. She only understood warmth. When Anna sang a lullaby that their neighbor had taught her in Ohio, Clara's eyelids fluttered and she asked for more. When Anna braided her hair, Clara would hold Anna's fingers and look up with a trust the size of the sky. "When I say you're my mama," Clara would insist, "it means you tell me stories and fix my dolls." For Clara, mama was a role filled by tenderness and presence, not by blood or by deliberation. One evening, at the town's harvest fair, the tension crystallized. A few men, pushed by cheap courage and a little liquor, began to mock Anna's Eastern ways. Someone tipped over a display of preserves meant for the bake-off. Someone else muttered about men being made fools. Ethan's ears burned with shame. His first instinct was to strike. His second was to shield. He did neither immediately. He walked to Anna's side and lifted her chin with two rough fingers. The gesture was not theatrical. It was an unspoken promise to stand next to her. Anna felt the weight of the town in that moment, both the burden and the potential to change it. She stood with Clara by her side and let the men's barbs fall like dust. When Ethan finally spoke, his voice was quiet, but each word landed firm. "We're keeping to our own business," he said. "You can speak your mind, but you leave my family out of it." The men mumbled and drifted away, but the ripple remained. Gossip does not die with silence. It mutates into other forms. Looks, sidelong remarks, a sudden chill at the midday meal. That night, Anna tucked Clara in and read the fox story one more time. Clara's small hand found Anna's and squeezed, a silent oath. Anna kissed her forehead, and for a moment allowed herself to believe it was enough. But the ache of uncertainty lingered, an ache that made her rise at dawn to wash dishes she didn't, but need to wash and sew buttons she did not need to sew. She was proving a point she had not set out to prove, that someone can come into a life and, with patience and care, be welcomed, not because they arrived, but because they stayed. Meanwhile, Ethan wrestled with his own tangled loyalty. He wanted his daughter to have laughter again. He wanted to honor Sarah's memory without letting grief become a stone that pinned them all down. He realized that the only way forward was to choose, not between the past and the future, but to include both. The inclusion required courage, especially when the town's eyes watched for any misstep. The question was whether that courage would be enough. Spring turned toward summer, and with it, the small household's bond grew firmer. Clara's laugh came easier now, bright and quick like a bell, echoing through the rooms and across the yard. She would wake Ethan early with a wooden horse to show him something new she'd learned with Anna, or quietly drag Anna outside to show her the path where the wild strawberries grew. Those tiny habits tied the three of them into a loose, lovely web. Then came the night that would change everything. It began as a slow, tense dusk. Ethan had been out late fixing a broken fence line. Anna had stayed behind with Clara, tucking the child into bed, humming a quiet tune. The ranch was silent, except for the soft breathing of the sleeping house and the far cry of coyotes. Without warning, boots pounded the porch. A man stepped into the light, a local ranch hand, known to drink too much and speak too freely. He had long been a voice of the town's harsher opinions, and tonight carried the slurred courage of the bottle. "What you doing here?" he slurred, aiming his words at Anna. "You took him while he mourned. You trying to steal a man's life?" He reached for Anna's arm in a motion that was both a grab and a threat. Anna stepped back, instinct bristling. Clara, half asleep but sensing the wrongness, clambered from bed and wrapped her arms around Anna's waist. "You leave Mama alone," she said, the 3-year-old fierceness of a child who vows protection. Her voice was small and earnest, a sudden bright chord in the dark. Ethan's spurs clicked like a gunshot as he strode onto the porch. He took in the scene, Anna trembling, Clara clinging, the man's face flushed. He moved with a calm that was more terrifying than shouting, and the man stumbled back. Words were unnecessary at that moment. Ethan's presence alone drew a line. Yet the town's tensions had teeth. The man sneered, spat on the boards, and lunged. Ethan answered with a swift swing that put the man down, a non-lethal but decisive blow. Clara began to cry in the raw, terrifying way a child does when danger touches the fabric of her trust. Anna scooped her up, holding her to her chest, while Ethan stood protectively between them and the figure on the porch. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, the offender pushed himself up, grumbled about leaving, and slunk off into the night. It would have been easy to let the incident end there, to leave bruises on pride only. But that night changed something deeper. Clara, shaken and small in Anna's arms, looked up and said a word that landed like a bell in Ethan's chest. "Mama." It was not a plea this time, nor was it a tentative test. It was a proclamation. Ethan felt a strange, aching relief and a new fear both. He had imagined such moments, her calling Anna Mama, and thought they would be private, quiet things. To hear it pronounced in the face of danger from the mouth of his child made the reality undeniable. He realized he had been guarding not only Clara from the town, but Anna from himself, the man who had not yet forgiven himself for loving once and losing. After the man left, Ethan sat on the porch steps with Anna and Clara, huddled close. He did not speak at first. When he did, his voice was low and careful. "You could have left," he said to Anna. "You had every reason to go." Anna looked up, rubbing Clara's back, and shook her head. "I had a reason to stay," she said simply. "She needed me." Ethan swallowed. He reached out, and for the first time since Sarah's grave, he allowed himself to rest his hand on Anna's shoulder. The gesture was small, but it carried the weight of a man loosening the knots of grief. "Then we'll do it together," he said. "Both of us." That night, Clara slept between them. Anna read the fox story in a voice that trembled a little at the memory of the confrontation. Ethan listened, his eyes on the child's small face and the silhouette of Anna, and felt an odd, almost guilty gratefulness. The town could hiss and whisper. The world might not understand how families could be made of new stitches and old cloth. But on this porch, with the prairie breathing around them, they had made a choice: to be a family. The confrontation had not solved everything. Rumors lingered, and suspicion would not vanish overnight. But something had shifted. Where before there had been questions and wary distance, there was now a mutual, hard-earned understanding. Anna had stood when it mattered. Ethan had stepped forward when fear might have stayed his hand. Clara had done what children do best, spoken plainly and drawn a truth so clear it could no longer be ignored. Morning after the fight, the town murmured louder. The scene had spread. The porch, the words, the blow. Some called Ethan a fool for letting his temper show. Others praised him quietly for defending his home. But what surprised everyone was how Clara handled the aftermath. She did not bear anger, she bore certainty. On Sunday, the church pews filled with people who liked to measure one another by the length of their silence or the weight of their gossip. When Ethan, Anna, and Clara walked in together, the air stilled. It was as though the creek itself paused to listen. Clara clambered onto the pew and with a small, fearless voice announced what she knew better than any of the grown folk. "This is my mama. We're a family now." Her words rang in the rafters, pure and unembellished. A hush followed. There were faces that could not hide surprise, faces that had read their old scripts and were forced to rewrite them. Then something softer happened. An older woman reached across the aisle and touched Anna's hand as if to test whether it was real. A boy who often tossed snide comments at the porch stepped forward and offered a small nod. The preacher, who had watched the town's slow hardening, simply smiled and said, "Love is not written by strangers. It's shown in the keeping." It was not immediate universal acceptance, but it was a beginning. People are stubborn creatures. They require seeing more than hearing. So the town watched them in the small ways towns tend to watch. Anna handing the preacher's wife a pie, Ethan guiding Clara as she learned to milk a cow, Clara racing Anna across the field with wild hair and laughter. Each ordinary act was a gentle declaration that this household was not a scandal, but a sanctuary. Weeks later, when the late summer sun warmed the earth and the cottonwoods made music with their leaves, Ethan stood by Sarah's grave and spoke in a voice that was steady and soft. "I loved her," he said, tracing the carved letters with a thumb. "I always will." He paused, and without shame added, "But love didn't lock me in the past. It let me be open to more. He told Sarah in the quiet that only those left behind know how to make, that he had found a way to love again without forgetting. It felt like permission, a blessing he could not have given himself before. The final test came one autumn evening when a storm rolled across the prairie, wind lashing and rain biting at the windows. Lightning painted the sky, and the roof sang with rain. Clara woke terrified, the power gone, and she clung to Anna. Ethan woke to the sound and stumbled into the room, sleepy and raw. He found Anna on her knees, soothing the child, singing the fox story in the dark. Without hesitation, Ethan crawled into bed beside them, pulling the quilt up and creating a circle of warmth. Clara, rubbing sleep from her eyes, mumbled into Anna's shoulder, "You're my mama, right?" The words were small, but the meaning was vast. Anna kissed the child's brow and whispered, "Yes, my love." Ethan, feeling the press and simplicity of the moment, put his arm around Anna and Clara both, his hand resting on Anna's. "Welcome home," he murmured, and his voice did not crack this time. In the months that followed, the town's stories softened. People who once sniffed at Anna's presence now waved when she passed. Ethan's brother, slow as a summer thundercloud to change, brought a jug to share one evening and offered a clumsy apology that carried more grace than words. The ranch prospered in the steady, unremarkable ways that matter most. A full pantry, a child who learned to read properly, a house that smelled of brush, ead and lavender, and the quiet, steady sounds of life. The heart of it, what made the change real, was not an edict from the town or a public declaration. It was 1,000 small moments. Anna teaching Clara to sew, Ethan whistling a tune while mending a fence, Clara bringing them both dandelions and insisting they make a crown. The child's trust had been the bridge. The adults crossed it by following her lead. On an ordinary evening, under an ordinary sky, Anna and Ethan sat on the porch while Clara slept inside. They watched the stars blink on, one by one, and the prairie hush settle. Ethan took Anna's hand and, with a softness he'd almost forgotten, said, "Thank you for staying." Anna squeezed his fingers back. "Thank you for choosing to stay open." They looked down the road together, not toward some distant promise, but toward the life they had built, ragged, real, and held together by choice. Somewhere far beyond the hills, Sarah's memory remained, not as a shadow that dimmed the present, but as a light that lingered, warming what had been added after. In the end, the family was not a sweeping gesture, but a slow, patient weaving of hearts. Clara slept and dreamed. Anna hummed quietly to herself. Ethan sat watch, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. And when, in the morning, Clara woke and tugged Anna to her chest and whispered that simple word, "Mama," it sounded like a bell calling them all to breakfast, to work, to the ordinary miracles of belonging.